Welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio, presented by the National Bicycle Dealers Association. Bicycle Retail Radio brings together retailers, vendors, advocates, and thought leaders for honest discussions about the latest issues facing bicycle retailers. The podcast dives deep into the challenges and triumphs of the bicycle industry, providing an in-depth look at the person behind the profession. Aiming to deliver content that's both relatable and thought-provoking, offering real-world tips and insights to help you find success in the bicycle industry. There's a human side of the business, and the podcast aims to share stories, experiences, and strategies that you can apply in your own shop. Whether you're looking for inspiration, practical advice, or a sense of community, you've come to the right place. The National Bicycle Dealer Association has a rich history of supporting retailers across the nation. Founded in 1946 with a mission to strengthen specialty bicycle retailers through education, through research, through communication, and through advocacy. The National Bicycle Dealer Association is proudly supported by our members and our membership. If you'd like to learn more about the benefits of joining, please visit nbda.com.
Attention, bicycle retailers. The NBDA Retailer Summit is coming to Las Vegas, March 25th. Join over 150 of the industry's top retailers at Retailer Summit West, an exclusive one-day event featuring powerful insights, hands-on workshops, and unbeatable networking opportunities. Spend the day with top experts in our industry. Don't miss this chance to elevate your business. Learn more and register at nbda.com.
Hello, listeners. Thanks for joining. I'm Heather Mason, NBDA President. My guest today is Bill Schouman, VP of Sales at Quality Bicycle Products. As the largest distributor of bicycle products in North America, Quality Bicycle Products navigated the pandemic whiplash by staying true to its core values. Be a true partner, create something special, deliver greatness, keep the customer first, and act with integrity. In the conversation today, learn actionable insights through an engaging discussion with an industry leader who vitally connects more than 5,500 independent bicycle retailers with the largest assortment of leading supplier brands. I hope you enjoy it. Bill, welcome to Bicycle Retail Radio. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Heather. I'm excited to be here.
I am thrilled. This has been like the week. So listeners, we're recording September 20th. And just yesterday, Bill joined us and supported NBDA retailer members in the industry with a webinar yesterday. So Bill, we get to back we are here. Yeah, I'm thrilled for this conversation. What I'd like to do is give our listeners just a little more insight into Quality Bicycle Products, your role, maybe some tips for retailers, and then looking forward to the future. How's that sound?
Sounds awesome. Great.
Yeah, many of our MBDA members, our listeners, have worked with Quality Bicycle Products or plan to in the future. So there's a great opportunity for us just to get really authentic here and open up the conversation to some questions that I hear most often. So first, I want to start with thank you for coming to the MBDA Retailer Summit in Bentonville, Arkansas. It was great to have you there. And it feels like yesterday, but that was May. So catch me up. How have you been since then?
I've actually been doing quite well. As everybody knows, the industry continues to be quite challenging, and that makes the days and weeks go by really quick. So I completely concur with you that it seemed like it wasn't very long ago, and it's hard to believe it was May, and we're 4 months on from that, but doing well and navigating the craziness that is the bike industry these days. But overall, doing quite well. Thank you.
Yeah, so the presentation, the time in Bentonville, you commanded the stage, giving a presentation on kind of putting some rumors out that had been circulating, and then talking very honestly with the crowd about where QBP is headed and your core values and your intentions forward. It's been a trying time. So we're September 2024. How's the industry now? How's QBP? Are you continuing to see that growth pattern or that, reset pattern that you talked about in Bentonville?
Yeah, so let me start first with, how is the industry doing overall? And from where we are sitting, I believe the industry is making progress, but we are a long way away from actually being quote unquote healthy as an industry. We are very much a data driven company, and the data that we are looking at, from what we can interpret, we believe from last year to this year, we made about a 50% dent in the problem that we're all trying to navigate through, which is a huge amount of excess inventory. And so when you start breaking that down, the biggest problem areas, if you will, still remain in the bike space. That's probably not a surprise to anybody that's out there. It's visible to everyone in the fact that you can see discounts from every brand, almost every category, and it's still quite prevalent. Now, on the positive side of things, we are seeing a lot of positive movement in terms of the industry getting healthy on the P&A and accessory side of things. Now, that's not to say it is all healthy, but the highest volume, items that retailers use on a day in and day out basis, or riders, use as well, that stuff is getting into a much healthier space. We're seeing a lot less discountings, much more map related sales, but there are still a lot of pockets of excess inventory that retailers can also see as to, okay, well, there are still plenty of sales to be had and opportunities to be made, but that is the most challenged inventory. But we still think there's about at least another 12 months before I think everyone can really start feeling good about the health of the industry that's out there.
Interesting. I like to hear though that there are, some pockets that are more positive, getting back to that MSRP. And it seems only natural that we do have to work through this excess of inventory. And the fact that you connect leading supplier brands with 5,000 plus independent bicycle retailers, the access to the data that you have is pretty powerful. So you're sitting in a position as VP of sales that you can really have a great overview of what's happening and report back. Big position. Do you love what you do? I mean, Bill.
Actually, I do, and it really goes back to, at my core, I'm a bike nut. I grew up in it. It's something that it's my passion, and as a professional, it's something that when you can mate your profession with what your interests are outside of it and blend those two things together, it can be a fantastic experience. So for me, it's one of those opportunities that I don't think of work the way like, hey, I have to go to work and that's a bad thing. It's like, no, I get to go up and go to work. To that end, I'm at that point in my career where people, some of my friends are talking about retirement, and it's like, that's like furthest thing from my mind, because I actually like what I do day in and day out. It's like, it's hard for me to even attempt to get into that mind space of like, that I wouldn't want to do this. So absolutely, it's a lot of information, but in the same token, the fact that it is also my passion, it's something where I can understand not only the numerical side of it, but also the contextual side of things. So that when I see a particular brand discounting something, I can relate that to and put it into the right place of saying, okay, it's this thing. This is what it actually means. So for example, there's a lot of 27.5 suspension forks that are on sale right now. And so if you like that size wheel, awesome, because you've got all these opportunities out there to buy great products at a discounted price. But when I can step back and look at the rest of the industry and say, okay, that was a thing a couple of years ago, and it is finding its spot in the overall marketplace. But the reality is, in the mountain bike space, way, way, way more 2.9 wheeled mountain bikes that are out there. So it's not affecting the vast majority, but it becomes more of an opportunity, and it's really just right sizing the amount of inventory that's in the system overall.
Yeah, it's interesting times. You've been at Quality Bicycle Products, I think, for 6 years now, I think, from my research.
Yep.
In the last couple of years, I'd say from an outsider looking in, even in the role I'm in, is extremely challenging, right? To make sure I'm bringing forth the right resources to retailers. I agree with you. I love my job. I wake up every day energized. I also love a challenge. So I've been loving the past couple of years. Do you like that challenge too? And are you finding that you're energized right now, super energized?
Oh, yeah, it's funny. I've been in the industry a long time, and for over 11 years, I worked for a company in the bike industry that really embraces innovation, and I'll just leave it at that. But for those 11 years, it got drilled into you about the need to constantly look to how to evolve and how to be better. And I joke with my team that reports to me that when the pandemic hit, it felt like I had a career prepping for this time when it was like things are going to get really hard, it's going to get crazy, but we need to navigate through this. And how are we going to evolve? And so, absolutely, I love it when there's all this stuff to change because, as a leader, it's one thing to say it in terms of like, hey, you have to incrementally always get better. I mean, you can read that in a textbook, and people go, well, of course, that's what it means. But in reality, when you're working with real people, there is always this inherent reluctance to change. And so there's a saying out there, never waste, a crisis. And this is one of those times in a person's professional career where it was like, this is a pretty major deal going on right now, and it allows those people that work for you to get into a space to be accepting and open for change. And along the way, it is getting people comfortable to say there is no perfect. The only thing that you can do is make progress and be constantly engaged to continue to refine and make it better and make it better. And organizationally for Q, it has been transformational for us to navigate this through the pandemic. Someone told me when I came to Q that, oh, that's interesting that you're there and you think you're going to make all these changes at Q because that's like a huge ship and it will not turn very fast. And while we're not a speedboat by any stretch of the imagination, we are able to move and be way more nimble than frankly, even I ever dreamed of right now. And it's the team has really risen to the occasion of embracing the challenges in front of us, but also looking at the opportunities. And we've moved away from, oh, I can't do this because of such and such reason, but rather to, this is what we need to do. And I think this is how we can do it. And it's like, okay, because now we're going from that crawl, walk, run thing. It's like, we're not running quite yet, but we are briskly walking for sure at this point.
Bill, you've given me goosebumps because I talk with retailers every day, and a lot of retailers at this point of time are really struggling preparing for what we would call the off season coming up and cash flow. And when it comes to a crisis, hunker down, get your team on board. And I always say commit to your core values and, customer service, that greeting within 3 seconds coming in the door, whatever those core values are. And I'm thinking about the message that you gave at the summit about QEP's core values and how you leaned on those to, work with retailers and how they actually strengthened your partnership post-COVID. Can you talk a little bit about those core values? Because I think there might be some things there that might resonate with our listeners.
Yeah. So in particular with our core values, there are things, that we throw out that we adhere to, which is, I think appropriate for this conversation about, being a true partner, delivering greatness, keeping the customer first. And those are, and for example, keeping the customer first, that can encompass not only our retailers that we are selling direct to, but it's also the brands that we are in service of, having a primary distribution business. And as you are navigating the challenges, whatever they may be, within your business, it's important to have something to ground yourself against, to say, okay, what do you value most about the business that you have created? And why that is important is because depending on what you may be challenged with, you may need to make decisions that are in stark contrast to what you actually believe in. But if it's at an extreme case, it's like you may need to make those compromises, but do it in a way that, one, it's something that you can control, and two, you can identify and say, I'm doing it for this reason, so that it doesn't really uh, take you away from the value, but it allows you to transition to a future where you can further support that. And for ourselves, we had to make some hard decisions, through the pandemic. I would say culturally at QBP, the hardest decision that we had to make was we went through 3 rounds of layoffs, and we had never had 3 rounds of layoffs. And for those of you that have not gone through it as a leader, it is the least enjoyable thing that you will ever do as a leader. Those are real people, a lot of great people that we needed to, part ways with. And it's something that it was necessary. It went against, our values. But when you are challenged to that degree, you need to make those hard choices. And, for example, when I think of retailers in the off season, you're challenged with the fact that a very seasonal business, you don't necessarily have a lot of cash flow coming in those winter months. And those individuals that may be, for example, on your payroll, you may have to reduce their hours. And hey, they rely on that money for a variety of reasons. Maybe they're the primary breadwinner or what have you, but if they understand what the needs are of the business, so that, hey, we need to do this so that we can actually get to the other side, so that once the season comes, it's like, I can actually give you full-time employment there. It does make it a little bit more understandable from the employee standpoint, and it at least opens them up to consider other options, that if they still value being in the bike industry as an employee over the winter, maybe there is something seasonal that's counter to the bike industry that they could do in their respective area.
Such good tips there. That is challenging, right? When you have to make those decisions, but you have to do what's best to keep the business open and surviving. Bill, you mentioned briefly on the value of delivering greatness. And I love that. I love all of QBP's core values. They really resonate with me. But this delivering greatness, I'm always asking retailers to remove any barriers to do business, create these wow moments. What does deliver greatness mean in context of QBP's operations?
Great question. I would say right now, I will give you what it means to us, and I will complement that by saying, at present, because of the challenges in the bike industry, we recognize that we don't always deliver greatness the way that we want. So for us, one of the core strategies that literally started the business was being the just-in-time resource for IVDs, for parts and accessories that's out there. And it sounds really great, and people, think, oh, of course, that makes sense, and what have you. But in today's environment, there are still supply chain challenges. So we are confronted with still having high amounts of inventory, which along with that means that we have carrying costs. And so we don't have just a completely open checkbook where we can just, buy absolutely as much as we possibly could stuff in our warehouses to be able to achieve a level of inventory that would allow retailers to have 100% confidence in us to be able to be that resource. Now we are getting there. The pre-pandemic, it was something that our fill rates on what we refer to as like our most important items, we assign values to them, like A and B ranked items are the most important ones. And in those cases, we are well into the 90% range on a week in and week out basis. But there's still a material gap when you're talking about upwards of 10% there. And now that changes from week to week, but we recognize that's a gap that we still need to be able to fill. So that's one aspect of like, what is delivering greatness? For our IBD customers, it's making sure that we are your just-in-time solution.
Mm-hmm.
The other component of it is also just in time. Let me start it this way. Just in time is relevant to retailers if we can get it to you in a timely fashion. It's one thing to have it, it's the other thing to actually get it to you. So if, for example, that you're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and you need a SRAM, GX rear derailleur, and you're trying to order it from us, but we only have it in our Reno facility, and it has to go across the country, great. We've accomplished the fact that we've had it, but now it's going to take 5 days to get it to you, and that isn't very just in time. And so literally that is an active conversation that we have now where we have gotten to the point where now we are much healthier. And it's not just about having things, it's also about moving the things in a way that best supports retailers so that they can start relying on us like they did pre-pandemic. But I will tell you, delivering greatness, it is more about a journey than it is a destination. If you ever think that you deliver greatness and it's like, hey, I'm done, it's like, boy, you do not understand what that means, because that is evolving every single day.
It is, yeah, I'm just thinking of the complexities of running QBP. I can't even imagine. Like I'd say it's easier for us to sit here and do our Monday order, to get the parts we need for our shop, or Monday, Friday order, and to expect that it's going to be there in a couple of days. But what you're doing with different warehouses and the delivery freight operations changing so quickly, I can't even imagine. You were mentioning yesterday in the presentation about the reduction in your box size so you can reduce freight costs, like all these things you're doing behind the scenes to help retailers and to help the.
Oh, 100%. And I think that is free freight is one of those items. It's a topic that retailers bring up all the time. Like, what is your free freight threshold? Or, how do you accomplish this? And I will tell you that that industry's the rates are not coming down, they're only going up. And coincidentally, we are about ready to enter a time where it's seasonal shipping costs, where our rates frankly go up dramatically, but yet we have this consistency that we have to continue to deliver to retailers through that time, which means the burden falls on us. And so making investments, strategic investments at a time that could be counterintuitive to a business, meaning that our business is just like a retailer's. It's like our business is going to slow down. We do not have the same cash flow that we have in the summer. But you need to be making investments into your business so that you can be better and faster and adapt to the marketplace. And that it's called pack size, for us, where literally we are custom making boxes for every order we process, because we know exactly the dimensions of whatever item that you happen to be ordering, so that we can get the physical box size now down as small as possible, so that the primary thing for retailers that whether they know it or not, they're benefiting from, is so that we can keep our freight costs down. Because otherwise, if we actually adapted to what the costs are that FedEx or UPS or whomever start charging us, we're not talking about free freight thresholds in the $400 to $500 range. It's like it goes up pretty dramatically from there. And so we are fighting literally every year to figure out how can we be more efficient to keep that in check, because it balances out with that, the delivering greatness of being that just-in-time supplier. Well, just-in-time only works if you can get things just when you need it. And if we have to say, yeah, you can only get that if it's $1,000, well, there out the window goes just in time, and now you're just placing stocking orders and that impacts the retailer's business in so many other ways.
There's so much happening there. I've been switching up a little bit. I've been very thankful in my role to learn more about the interesting relationship, that distributors have, not only maintaining relationships with brands, but also maintaining all the relationships with retailers. As a distributor, you have a very special role connecting these brands to the retailers, but also you are managing a relationship with so many people, and in almost in a different form. And I've seen how intricate that is. So your value of keep the customer first, how do you ensure that you're doing that with so many different customers? And is there anything there that maybe might be a nugget for retailers to learn?
The one area that jumps to mind for me when we say keep the customer first is making sure that the playing field is level for all people. Um, so what that means to me is that I think everyone, believes and sees and understands the fact that um, there's more and more business being driven to the web. Consumers are the ones that we all ultimately serve, and they are choosing to buy on online progressively more and more. It's not going to be the end all be all of everything. I'm not trying to say there's doom and gloom coming to the brick and mortar IBD, but rather that is becoming an increasing part of the business. Now, there are differences in the business models between those that serve the customer through a web-oriented business versus a brick-and-mortar business. But the opportunity for profitability should remain the same. And so one thing that we really make sure that we execute as consistently as possible is, regardless of what your business model is, there's a similar starting point for everybody, that you have access to the same things that anybody else does. There's no secret double handshake deal happening off to the side that somebody has to compete against. And that is a real conversation that happens not only from ourselves outward to our retailers, but also when we have conversations with the brand about how are you going to market? How are we trying to support them? So in relation to that, it's one thing to get the pricing in a level playing field, but it also means that we're also helping on the other side for the MAP enforcement. And I will tell you, MAP enforcement is a thankless job that's out there. Because if you take that on as a responsibility, the individuals that you catch that are violating MAP, they're not very happy with you. But every instance that you catch somebody, doing that, there's likely as at least an equal, if not greater number of retailers that see it, and then they blame you for, what are you doing for this? And you should get this corrected now. But it is something that as an organization, we see the value in it, and it's important work. And like I said, it's a little bit thankless from time to time. But if we make it so that the consumer is just choosing the path that they want, and it's not overly advantageous one way or the other, it provides us visibility for all businesses to say, how do we need to evolve in the future? Because like I said, we're all in service of that rider, whether we know it or not. It's like, that's who our boss actually is.
Yeah, I like that answer, and I like the level even playing field. I think that's really important, because then people can go, the relationship can bloom naturally how that person or the retailer or brand decides to, how invested they are in it. And it's an even playing field from there. There's a lot of, being in your position, I'm sure you work with a lot of brands who are looking to strengthen their connection to the retailer and are using QVP as their distribution channel. And there's a lot of retailers looking maybe to strengthen brands with suppliers. Any thoughts you have on just that strengthening of that relationship between brand and retailer?
Well, the way I would answer that is, there's a lot of really great products in the marketplace. That is something that, if you are a representative or an individual brand, I totally understand that your belief is that your product is absolutely 100% the best product, and there's no reason why anybody should buy anything else. The reality is there are literally hundreds of brands that say the same thing about their product. And fortunately, customers are the ones that make that decision. And each, thing that a brand develops, that differentiating aspect of their product, means that there's a reason why they built that product the way they did, because they're trying to solve something for the consumer. But it does not land equally with that end rider. Now, where I'm going with this is there's no shortage of good products. So as a retailer, for example, you need to make some choices. You need to be able to hear your customers out as to what they specifically need. But in the same token, you literally can't be all things to all people. You need to make choices about what you represent in your store, what you can be actually truly knowledgeable about, because that becomes the value that you bring to the consumer, is your knowledge about that respective product that's out there. Now, from a brand, to a retailer, I think what's important there, and it's something that we literally have these conversations on a weekly basis with brands, of making sure that there is margin opportunity for retailers. And that is a very lively discussion that is there. They're in the business, obviously, to be profitable and sustainable themselves. And so you can't hold it against them for needing to make profit. But in the same token, they need to take all the factors into consideration and say, but if you are coming to market, this is the market that you are competing in. And if you understand the value of, for example, the IBD that is out there, they need to be able to make enough margin in there for them to be sustainable too. So how can you, brands, solve the equation of making sure there is enough margin in there? Now, some brands, as we all know, some of them bypass the marketplace altogether and they just go direct to consumer. But what I believe they are now understanding is dealing direct to consumer. Oh, there's a lot of work that IBD actually delivers, and they are challenged to actually meet the service level that's out there. And so the bike industry to me has always been a funny one, in that I jokingly have had these conversations with my peers over the years, where you see somebody come in from outside the industry and they immediately start, proclamating how they're going to change the industry and how backwards it is, and you name it. There's plenty of descriptions that are out there, and you can almost like mark your calendar, like, how long is this person going to be in the industry? Because they are making these statements and they don't understand the nuances that is the bike industry. Now, there are certainly exceptions, and there's a lot of really great individuals that have come in from outside. But I think the common trait that I hear from them, it's not that I hear from them. They actually are quiet and they listen. They listen to what is going on. They seek to understand. And then once they feel like they have understood what the marketplace is, then they start actually adapting to it. And so from a brand standpoint, I see some brands that have been making some great strides, and the leaders there are pretty in check with what's going on in the marketplace. And they've been able to lead their respective organizations on a path that includes everybody, instead of just trying to think about themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. While we're here on this topic of brands and suppliers, I'm thinking about inventory. And inventory is, you mentioned earlier that, the boom did a lot of retailers, distributors, brands ended up with a lot of inventory. Some of the conversations I'm having with retailers now is about looking at the brands you're doing business with. There's a lot of new brands on the market, e-bike brands. And we're suggesting to retailers to possibly consolidate some of their buying and go with some, having a strategic plan, going with some partners. I remembered at the summit that part of your presentation included some brand analysis. I think that QVP did. Any tips or strategies that you have for retailers who are listening, who might be thinking about their inventory and just relationships in general?
Sure. The way that we have thought about our business in terms of which brands do we align ourselves with, there is a fundamental threshold that they need to be able to cover, which is, one, do they have relevant, compelling, exciting products that basically solve a need for the rider? And are there differentiating factors to them versus many Me Too products that are out there? And then last but not least for us, is there profit for the retailer to actually sell that product? And it seems obvious, but yet everybody has their own different you know, margin structure that they offer to retailers, and that may or may not work for different business models that are out there. It's not certainly not a foolproof method, but once you just make that choice about what is there, you need to be able to commit to it in a way that, and when I say commit, it's not always about how much inventory did you buy and how much did you bring in, but rather commit to it from the standpoint that you are knowledgeable about the product, because that it becomes your differentiating factor. So you have to set some guardrails up around how much can I actually be an expert in, so that when I interact with a customer, the value that I'm giving them is knowledge, so that they don't have to do all their own research online, and I can help guide them to that decision. Because there are literally hundreds of brands that could fit into that notion of everything I just described in terms of relevant, compelling, exciting products. There's no shortage of them, but you need to make that decision so that you can actually then deliver that. And then as it relates to, so one is commitment to knowledge of that product. The second does become commitment in terms of how much do you invest in that business and or brand, if you will. From that standpoint, especially in this environment, we're in an environment very much of a lot of unknowns still. It's getting better, like I said, but still a lot of unknowns. As a business, you need to decide what is your comfort level of investing, because I know, heck, I have sold preseason programs. The greater the amount of product the retailer is willing to commit to, the more margin opportunity they have. Sold it, plenty of days. But in this environment, as a business, you need to make a decision about what is your comfort level of investment in there. And the better path for you may be to forego some of the margin opportunity to give you some of the flexibility in this market to be able to navigate whatever the challenges are, but be able to also convey to those brands that you do choose to do business with that they understand what you are doing and why you are doing it. So it's not about the immediate gratification of getting a big order, but rather it's like, if I am choosing you, then I want you to choose me as well. And this is what I'm willing to do from a commitment of knowledge and staffing and like trying to put my best foot forward on your behalf. But I'm asking for something, in return, which is whatever kind of support that brand may have to offer. So there's a lot there. Maybe it's a non-answer that some people go, well, of course, that type of stuff. But it's real things that need to happen.
So important. The knowledge piece that you touched on, I've had that conversations with retailers, that conversation exactly. And it's training the staff, making sure your staff members are super knowledgeable. If you have too many brands, it's hard for your staff member to absorb it all, retain it all, and be able to communicate it. And I've had even retailers talking about just reducing models from different brands just to make it easier for their employees to communicate, the value add feature benefit of each model. So I think there's some definite great there.
And I know this is an extreme example, but to your point right there, I remember this was a number of years ago, frankly, pre-pandemic. I was traveling in California, and I won't say which retailer I was in, but suffice it to say they supported the high-end road market. And I was amazed at this high-end road section that they had in the store. And normally I do not try to waste any salesperson's time when I'm in there. I'm just trying to see what's going on. But I was amazed, like I was in my mind calculating the sheer amount of inventory investment this business had in this product. And so they are committed now. It is on their floor, and it was well in excess of $150,000, $200,000 in high-end road product. And I thought to myself, how on earth as a consumer are you going to navigate this?
Mhm.
And so I played the consumer a little bit because I needed to know how they were going to accomplish this. And the person came in, did all the right things in terms of engaging me as a customer and, asked a few probing questions. But the first question I had for them is, where do I even begin? Considering one versus the other. And the response that I got from the retail employee, really put me back, which was, well, which color do you like?
Oh,
And I was looking at this room of great road brands, and I think every one of them just, cringed because all of the time and effort they put in to build what they perceive to be the greatest product just got dumbed down to which color you like. And to me, I just made a mental note that was like, there is no way this is going to be successful. And you fast forward to today, and that business is no longer. That was not a sustainable business model because they let choice get out of hand, and they didn't have a compelling reason to be able to steer somebody one way or another, or to hear what the rider may want and then to be able to fill that need. I mean, it's just choice and choice of color, and it's like, that's not a good place to leave yourself in.
I like that story, Bill. Thank you for sharing. That's a good story for us. Let's see. I have another question on community. So you touched in your presentation about QBP, which is a certified B Corp, which is wonderful, and how much you do give back to the community. And we're continuing to tell retailers or to advocate to retailers, if you can, get involved in your community, go to events, donate bikes to your local, use bikes if you take them on trade, however you can get involved. Is there value to that? And why does QBP put value in doing that?
The reason why we put value in that really comes down to what our mission is as an organization. Our mission is actually to get every butt on a bike. And it is a huge, audacious, bold goal that in reality, there isn't one senior leader that believes we'll ever, quote unquote, accomplish that. It is like I had said earlier, it is more about the journey and the fact that the more you are on this journey, the greater things will become if you are committed to it. So for ourselves, in order to get everybody on a bike, there are numerous elements that need to change. Infrastructure is one, access to bikes, knowledgeable trails to ride, you name it. There is no shortage of things that could be better that's out there. And so for us, it is the commitment to the mission that is out there, but also what we see, we realize we are not we need to establish a system by which we can support a broad spectrum of people across, not only the US, but also Canada, and to help the people that are closest to their local markets. How can we be that spark of change for them? Because many times when you're trying to raise money, as an example, it's not about finding the one donor that's going to just fund everything, especially on a national basis, but rather you need some seed money there to get things going. And then in your local community, you can actually find the money there to, for example, fund an infrastructure project, or have some trails that are specifically built. But it's more than just the money side of things. As a retailer, as an individual, as a rider, if you think that the world would be better if more people were on bikes, it just requires some time on your behalf. I think about, in our market here in Minneapolis, believe it or not, we have a great mountain bike trail system here. And it's not because we have the most money. We actually have a very good organization that raises money. But the difference maker is they have a really great volunteer system here. And I know a lot of my coworkers at QBP volunteer their time to work on the trails. And that's what makes a difference. And so it is literally something where I live about a mile away from a trailhead from my house. And I jokingly say, I know there's about a dozen other great places to ride in Minneapolis, but the crew that works on the trail near my house, they do such a great job of maintaining it and modifying it and, updating it. It's like, I never get bored riding there. And
Right?
so I never have to load it on my car to go someplace. But that's really the difference maker that can be out there that will build that community that ultimately then makes cycling just that much better.
Yeah. So every butt on bikes, more butts on bikes. It's a journey. Like I
It,
agree with you.
exactly.
You have access to a lot of data. You're working with lots of brands and retailers. Are there any trends that you see right now? Any product categories that you see doing better than others, or just any insight into any trends you could give us?
Uh, I I would assume most people, already know this, but obviously e-bikes is the biggest, trend that is happening in the bike industry. No great surprise there. That being said, it is also a segment of the market that has frankly the most challenges to it. So it's going in the right direction. There's just more and more of those bikes being sold, not only through the IBD channel, but a lot of direct to consumer sales happening. And for me, that is it's this great opportunity that we really can't waste. And what concerns me about the industry is, one, the brands that are not willing to support their product, in the marketplace. And so there's varying degrees of companies that some are really great about supporting their product, others less so or challenged. Um, but every one of those negative experiences that the rider has, it can mean that we had the opportunity to bring somebody into the cycling space and make them a rider for life. And then they have this negative experience and then it can turn them off.
Mhm.
And so that is one of the areas that there's some pros and cons to it. And I get it that there are challenges especially at the retail level of, okay, how do I service these bikes? I need to make money on them. If I'm going to be providing service and I didn't sell them, but we've got to figure out a better way to keep those riders engaged with cycling overall. Because if we put up too strong of a front and basically say to those riders, whether they know it or not, it's like, well, you didn't buy it from the IBD, so you are on your own. We're just going to lose them. It's
Mhm.
not that they're um, it's I'm asking people to think more long term. I don't know exactly what the solution is, but we can't turn people off from going to the bike shops because the IBDs in their local markets are so critical to us to be there 10, 15, 50 years from now to make sure that cycling is still what we believe it can be. And each time we turn somebody off because they made a choice to buy direct to consumer, not a great thing.
Yeah.
And I know I'm getting a little bit on my soapbox there, but
No.
the other trends that we certainly see, uh, certainly a shift in the road bike market. No surprise. We have our own proprietary brands that lean heavily, into the gravel space. Gravel is an area that is very accepting of a wide spectrum of riders. That still feels very good. A lot of positive momentum. Much more in the wheelhouse of most IBDs that are out there. Uh, Mountain bikes, it's not that it's necessarily growing overall, but it has remained very steady. It's still really good, especially when you incorporate e-bikes into that mountain bike experience. It's actually doing quite well. Beyond that, you kind of see now that things have settled down, you're seeing a pretty normal assortment of like what's the value differential between like helmets and shoes and aftermarket parts. Those things are starting to return more to normal percentages in a business.
I have another question, and I'm going to hit you a little off guard with this. If you were a retailer, Bill, if you had the keys to My Bike Shop and we're going to open the door up tomorrow, what do you think the opportunity is? Where do you think that you might be thinking you should focus, maybe when it comes to customer service, inventory management, product mix? I don't know, just wherever you want to go with that. If you were a retailer.
That's actually a hard question to answer, in that, to me, when I think about the question, like what would I do? First, I'd have to put it into context as to like what kind of market am I talking about? Am I talking about a major metro area? Am I talking about a city that might be 30, 40, 50,000 people? Am I in a much more seasonal climate like up in Minnesota, or am I someplace in, I don't know, Georgia, or if I'm in San Diego, California, where you can ride 365 a year? Those would all have influences on how I would answer the question. But at the end of the day, what I would be seeking is to understand what the marketplace is and how can I differentiate myself from the other competitors and not just be a me too bike shop. The simple question would be, okay, I can have this broad assortment of product, and yes, I'm going to have some kids bikes, I'm going to have some fitness bikes and gravel and mountain and road, all those things. But that is a very difficult way to differentiate yourself. And that's what I see a lot of people try to execute. And the path that I would prefer to try to figure out is there a gap in the marketplace, for example, of a really good mountain bike shop or a really good, road shop, or even subdividing some of the experiences of saying, look, I may be into mountain bikes, but it's this other category and it's relevant to my part of the US, as an example. Then once you made that determination, then figure out what are the best brands that align with who your values are, and really make sure that you have this curated assortment that you are bringing to the customer, and say, as a consumer, like what, for example, if I chose to be at the higher end of the marketplace, like I want to be an influential mountain bike store, if you think about what that part of the business is, it's not just about buying the bike. It's about having all the accessories. It's about customization. It's about allowing that bike to be unique to you, and making sure that you had an assortment that when the consumer came into the store, they were actually excited, like, hey, what's the new thing that you just brought in? I've got to have that. To be engaged in, like, you have to be so well read, so to speak, in that area, so that you do become the expert. And it can go beyond your own experience, although I am a huge proponent of, you kind of sell what you ride. It's the best way to ensure that you can have a strong opinion about something. But you got to be authentic, and you've got to really live it and breathe it. And customers pick up on that. I think of so many shops around the country that, and I jokingly, when I travel with sales reps, the measure that I have is when I go into a shop, and it can virtually be any store that really does their business well. It's like, if I feel my wallet coming out of my pocket and going, I would totally buy like a jersey or a t-shirt because there's something going on here that I want to be a part of. They've hit that secret sauce of like, okay, you're doing something really well. And it's getting that emotive feeling out of your customers. If you can hit that, then you've got a real recipe for success.
Oh, Bill, I love that. And I think I have the same little gauge, because if I want to buy something, I'm like, this is a good shop. I just have two more questions for you. So you do a lot of programs for retailers. You have the relationship with Bike Flights. I know you have your in-house brands. And I'm thinking about the work I do at the NBDA for the diverse retailers we work with. Lots of programs. And so often I'm just telling our members, come, show up, take part, do this. We need to, there's lots of opportunity. So a call out to the over 5,000 retailers that work with QBP. Is there any programs or things you'd like to see retailers engage more with QBP on that you offer that maybe not enough retailers are taking advantage of?
There's a couple that jump to mind. One is for a lot of retailers, mountain bikes is an important part of their business. And for that experience to remain really good for the rider, it's making sure that your suspension is actually tuned up and maintained. Yet that is a very challenging thing for a lot of quote unquote, regular shops to actually do. Sure, you can air them up, but it's like rebuilding them, servicing them. Hey, it may not be your cup of tea to like get into that level of detail and service. That's an area that we can help you out with that. We do have suspension services available to do all that work. You don't have to take on the burden of stocking all the little bits and pieces. We have experts that do that day in and day out. And I think that's one area that people could lean into us more. And I say that not because it's a huge revenue generator for us, but it's something that I think would solve a problem for retailers.
Yeah.
The other area, sure, there's programs that I would love to have customers engage more with us on, but I don't put the burden on necessarily the retailer to like figure it out. I'll use an example. We use something called bundle deals, where it's an opportunity for retailers for usually a modest inventory investment. They can unlock some meaningful discounts. But in order for us to execute that within the technological structure we have, requires a special way that they go into a section about that bundle deal, and then they can make their choices. And it is counter to just how they would start a cart normally. That's something I would like more retailers to participate in. But I also have challenged my team to say, I don't think our customers understand what we are asking them to do, and to make sure that the message gets out there as to, one, it exists, and two, then challenging our own team to say, if we are going to ask this of them, we have got to make it easier. And I talked to my team about the customer experience, and it's something that, as I talked about, delivering greatness, we have plenty of things to work on. That's but one of them. But specifically related to a program, I think of things like that where there's a trainer program, for example, that's going on right now that's like substantial discounts. It's like, man, if you use this, it is super easy to do, but you got to know to actually do it. And that's where I'm identifying this to say, team, we've got to make sure that people understand what we're asking them to do.
I love that, because I feel like it's the same thing. We have a lot of content, a lot of opportunity, but we don't always clearly communicate it so people don't understand. Bill, I mean, you're volunteering your time to come on Bicycle Retail Radio. I really appreciate you. Your whole team. It's just such a pleasure to work with you. I only hear really positive things from retailers about QBP. Possibly a contact. So if our listeners have more questions about QBP, maybe they don't have an account yet, want to sign up. Maybe someone has a question that we can get to you specifically. Would you share a contact?
Sure. Yeah, I'm always happy to interact directly with retailers. So you can use my direct email address. It's B Schouman, so BSCHOUMAN @QBP.com is the easiest way to reach out to me consistently. And we can go from there. And I would say for those retailers that I have interacted with, I do actually answer my email. I hold myself to the same standard that I do any of my employees. So if you send me an email, and unless I'm on vacation and it didn't get forwarded to somebody, you can expect that within 24 hours. You will hear directly from me, and I may copy in one of my employees, but I'm not just pawning it off to somebody else to respond to you.
Excellent. Bill, thank you again.
You're welcome. It was great being here. Appreciate the opportunity. And yeah, this was a lot of fun. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you for tuning into Bicycle Retail Radio, presented by the National Bicycle Dealers Association. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and if you did, please like, subscribe, or leave us a review. Sharing this podcast with your friends helps us reach more listeners and continue to bring you the best content. Remember, we host 2 shows per week with ever-changing guests and fresh content to keep you both informed and inspired. The National Bicycle Dealer Association is committed to providing valuable events, webinars, and opportunities for industry education and connection. Stay up to date by visiting nbda.com to see our event calendar. Special thanks to Francis Abbott for the promotional graphics for today's episode. If you're interested in advertising on Bicycle Retail Radio or have a guest suggestion, visit nbda.com to learn more. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time on Bicycle Retail Radio.